for the NFL draft. So let's do a little dream pick brought to you by American Family Insurance. American Family Insurance, based in Wisconsin, by the way. Always a great pick because their agents are there to protect your dreams. Get a quote and find an agent at amfam.com. Here's what we've got. Dream pick for each of these quarterbacks. I'm going to give you the quarterback. You tell me what their dream pick should be as to where they land in the NFL draft. Let's start with University of Miami's Cam Ward.
Oh, it's the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans. He's going to go number 1 overall. And what I like about what Tennessee has done is that they've methodically built out that offensive line. They went out and spent big money on Dan Moore Jr. and Kevin Zeitler in free agency. They got Peter Skronsky and J.C. Latham in the draft in the first round in back-to-back years. They're building a bully up front. And that's the best thing in terms of being able to protect and develop your young franchise quarterback. Before he can be a guy that develops into a force multiplier, you have to prevent the career from getting knocked out of this kid. And by having a strong offensive line in place, it goes a long ways to being able to aid in that. So I like Cam Ward being able to go to the Tennessee Titans. Feels like there's a new vibe around the organization, around the team. With the general manager change. So Cam Ward, Tennessee Titans.
I have the same thing, Cam Ward to the Titans. And after we just spoke with Kevin Clark and he revisited that interview that he did with Brian Callahan of the Titans, who went back and watched his Zooms of Joe Burrow and his rookie year, this should be the dream landing spot for him because they're already preparing for him and they're looking back at success they've had with a quarterback, or that he's had success with the quarterback in Joe Burrow, and figuring out how they were able to arrive at that point. So Cam Ward, Titans.
All right, Smalls, let's start with you. QB dream pick brought to you by American Family Insurance. What is the dream pick if you're Shedeur Sanders?
I still think it's the New Orleans Saints. I love the idea of him going there. He would still be a top 10 pick with Kellen Moore, now the head coach there. We've obviously seen him have success. I think he would be able to dial up some things that would really be favorable and extract the best out of Shedeur from an offensive standpoint. And I just like the idea of him going somewhere where football really matters and a place that wouldn't view who he is as a person as a negative. They would view it as an additive. They would love his swag. They would love his confidence. Shedeur to the Saints.
Yeah, I think the New Orleans Saints is the right answer, but if you want to go off the board, I'm going to roll with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ooh.
I like the idea of him getting with Mike Tomlin, an organization that has been defense first. They're always going to play good on that side of the ball with Mike T as their head coach. What has eluded them is being able to have a difference maker on the offensive side of the ball. They've got to be able to get more firepower on the offense. They've been bottom third over the last half decade when it comes to overall QBR. Something about that has to change. It feels like Shedeur Sanders will be the perfect fit for that. They got DK Metcalf and George Pickett on the outside, Pat Freiermuth at the tight end spot. Those are 3 legitimate good receivers in the National Football League. So I like Shedeur Sanders with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right, let's go to the next one. Dream pick brought to you by American Family Insurance. Jackson Dart. CC, what should his dream pick be?
Jackson Dart's dream pick would be with the New York Giants, but I don't think it would be with the 3rd overall pick. I think the Giants trade back into the first round. They've got the 34th overall pick. I could see them getting into the late 20s, and that seems to be Jackson Dart territory based on what the latest mocks are. So I'm going to say
Oh, and by the way, you have Sean McVay at your disposal, who you know is an offensive genius and is going to be able to really dial up things for you. And you have a lot of young playmakers on that side of the ball. I think he'd be a great fit with the Rams.
And he was once an LA guy at USC prior to going to Ole Miss, of course. All right, next one. Tyler Shuck, Louisville quarterback, the oldest of the quarterbacks that are potentially going to be drafted high in the NFL draft. Smalls, where should his dream pick, brought to us by American Family Insurance, be?
So CC said that the Giants trade back up and they get Jackson Dart. I took that same approach with Tyler Shuck and the Giants. They need to keep adding to that quarterback room. I think if they get Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter with the 3rd overall pick, you get somebody you know is going to be a definite playmaker. At different points in the draft, you can go out there and find a quarterback that you can develop and that could potentially be that guy for the future.
Yeah, I think it's the Seattle Seahawks for Tyler Shuck. And I think that's a situation where they've got a guy for now in Sam Darnold who's going to be their starter. But if you look at the contract for Sam Darnold, he's there for a good time, not necessarily a long time. They need somebody that they're going to transition to. If you look at Tyler Shuck, a lot of the same physical tools that Sam Darnold has, and I think that'd be a great fit. Oftentimes, regimes, general managers, head coaches, they want to find their guy in the draft. And so even though I think Mike McDonald has conviction on Sam Darnold, I could see a world where they look at Tyler Shuck as somebody that they could potentially transition to long term.
Sam Darnold's only 2 years older than him. How wild is that?
Crazy,
That's so
isn't it?
crazy.
It's only 2 years older
Crazy.
than Tyler Shuck. Just wild. All right, dream pick, a CC, Jalen Milroe, Alabama quarterback.
Ooh, this is my favorite one. Jalen Milroe to the dog pound. The Cleveland Browns. Listen, they got a good offensive line. The way they talking, it looks like they're going to take Travis Hunter paired with Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku. That's a pretty good receiving corps. And think about it. Cleveland doesn't really have a clear-cut number one quarterback. I know they traded for Kenny Pickett, but he doesn't feel like the guy. I think Jalen Milroe is a player that they could trade back into the first round, maybe potentially even fall to them in the second round at pick number 33. But I love the idea of Jalen Milroe having that skill position core to take some pressure off of him, having that defense that can create field position and extra possessions for him. Jalen Milroe, Kevin Stefanski's handpicked quarterback at the Cleveland Browns.
And obviously he has familiarity with Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator in Cleveland, who was
No
his
doubt.
OC at Alabama. So there's synergy there. So I had originally picked the Browns for Jalen Milroe, but I'm going to pivot and I'm going to say the Pittsburgh Steelers. You don't know what's going to happen right now currently with Aaron Rodgers, and regardless of whether or not he ends up in Pittsburgh, you need a quarterback of the future. And whoever is going to be there in that quarterback room with him is going to have a certain mental makeup to deal with everything that's going to come with it, the spotlight. Jalen Milroe's been there and done that, having been at Alabama. I think he'd be a great fit for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers.
At 21?
Why not?
I don't think there's such thing as reaching for quarterback if you get it right.
I wouldn't that high. I think it'll be in a later round.
Well, then you just gave the reason as to why not.
But still, I don't think so. But let me put it this way. Asterisk on that answer, depending on what happens with Aaron Rodgers leading up to the draft.
Understood. All right, next one. Will Howard, dream pick CC for Will Howard, the Ohio State quarterback, previously Kansas State.
Will Howard is a developmental player to me, and so I'm looking at places like the Detroit Lions. I think that would be a good fit for Will Howard, somewhere where he can sit behind Jared Goff, a quarterback that has some physical tools but not going to overwhelm you with arm talent, but he thinks the game the right way and somebody that has shown himself to be a winner. I think sitting behind a guy like Jared Goff would be a great place for Will Howard to learn. And, of course, Detroit is always going to have a good offensive line under Dan Campbell, and they've got a ton of players in their skill position core, so it makes it a little bit easier for a young quarterback.
I was thinking about his development as well, which is why I put him in Minnesota. Just the idea of being in that building with Kevin O'Connell, who does get the best out of quarterbacks, and they need to add somebody else to that room. There's still questions about who the true backup is going to be. We have questions about J.J. McCarthy. Adding another quarterback in Minnesota, specifically with Kevin O'Connell, Will Howard there.
All right, last one. American Family Insurance dream pick for QBs, best landing spot. Quinn Ewers, Smalls. Where should the Ohio State, now Texas quarterback go?
I like the idea of him in Seattle. I know we've thrown around a couple names to Seattle. I like the idea of sending Quinn Ewers there.
CC.
I don't hate Quinn Ewers in Seattle. How about Quinn Ewers with the Miami Dolphins?
Good one.
Get with Mike McDaniel, that speed skill position core. I know they've got Zach Wilson there, but he's the guy that's going to be the backup. Quinn Ewers is going to be the developmental project long term. They've got to add to that quarterback room because there's no way they can feel good about just having Zach Wilson as depth behind Tua Tagovailoa, knowing Tua's injury history. So they've got to add. I think Quinn Ewers would be the perfect fit for them.
How about Quinn Ewers back to college, where he should have gone?
But he couldn't stay at Texas.
I didn't say that. He should have taken whatever money and run in college because he is not going to make that kind of money in the NFL. He is actually a perfect example of someone that I think is actually passing up money by going pro. He would have made more by way of transfer than he's going to make in the NFL in year one because he's probably going to be a 5th or 6th round pick. You don't think North Carolina